Welcome in to another Friday edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Mercifully, we are down to the final two games of the football season for the Boilers, who head up to East Lansing to battle the slumping Spartans tomorrow. Meanwhile, it's rare territory now for Purdue Hoops, coming off their first November loss in 4 years after what was a pretty disheartening loss at Marquette, albeit following a tremendous win over Alabama. So we're going to talk about all of it, not only what's going on the gridiron, but on the hard court as well in this latest edition of BGR. But first, Gold and Black Radio, I should say GBR. I should get the acronym right. Gold and Black Radio brought to you by our friends at Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler up. Sand Valley Resort. Celebrate all that the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Experience everything from Thanksgiving dinner. How about that next week? Curling and ice hockey to ice fishing and snowshoeing, and even the restorative benefits of a guided cold plunge in the frozen lakes. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And our pals at the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research doing very, very important work. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from across the university conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Joining me now, as he always does, to lead off Gold and Black Radio on a Friday edition is our good pal, Tom Dienhart. And Tom, well, the good news is I think you can argue right now that Michigan State is the second worst team in the Big Ten. Problem is that there's a pretty clear and obvious number one at the bottom of the league standings.
Yeah, the preseason prediction of Purdue being the worst team in the Big Ten has turned out to be accurate, Derek Schultz. So, yeah, here we are. 1-9, 9 losses in a row. Purdue hasn't won since August 31st. We were still cutting our grass back then. Now we're raking leaves, getting ready for Thanksgiving. Seasons went off the rails long ago. But you know what, Derek? This opponent, Michigan State, as you said, not formidable. 4-6. They are playing for their bowl life. If they beat Purdue and they play Rutgers the last week, they're bowl eligible. So the Spartans have something kind of tangible to play for. Purdue, on the other hand, I guess you got pride. That's certainly on the line. Is this team still competitive? What type of fight is left? And it could be very revealing, the type of effort and performance we see tomorrow night, or I should say tonight, from the Boilermakers up there in what's going to be a cold Spartan Stadium.
Yeah, and it's tough, Tom, because you mentioned stuff like pride, and a lot of the fans are probably rolling their eyes on it. The ones that are even here that haven't completely checked out on the team because, we stopped talking about can this season be salvaged a long time ago, but we keep kind of lowering the bar for them, right? And we just keep saying, if you could just show something, and here we have 2 more games, if you can just be competitive, even put yourself in a position to beat what's really just not a very good Michigan State team on coming up tomorrow night, and then if you could just stay within the same area code as IU in the Old Oaken Bucket game, then maybe there's some face saving there, something to point to going into the offseason?
Yeah, possibly. But of course, the big overarching storyline that's enveloped the program as the season's gone worse and worse is the future of Ryan Walters.
Yeah.
It's the only thing people are talking about, Derek. Let's not kid ourselves. Will Ryan Walters be back in 2025? If he is back, what will his staff look like? The questions sort of tumble out of your head as soon as you think of them. And, and when will a decision be made, Derek? Mm-hmm. Are they going to wait to after the IU game? If they do, my friend, the first signing day for high school kids is December 4th. It comes up just 4 or 5 days after the IU game. And then the portal opens on December 9th. So my point being, if this decision is not made till after the IU game, they're going to have to come up with a plan ASAP if there is a coaching change, or even if the staff is altered, because they got to move forward with high school signing day, like I said, on December 4th, and then the portal on the 9th. So, boy, there's so many balls up in the air right now, so many unknowns surrounding this program beyond Derek just trying to win on Friday night.
And you talk about, what Purdue's going to have to focus on moving forward here. I thought Max Clair's post-game comments after the loss to Penn State last week were interesting. And he's one of those guys that any coach, whether it's Ryan Walters or not, is going to want to keep around in a Purdue uniform. We talked about salvaging the season being out, but is it now about really salvaging those individual relationships with some of these individual players that you really want to retain here moving forward?
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of become I don't know, maybe every man for themselves is too harsh of a way to phrase things, but certainly, these players are looking out for what's best for them, and I guess they should, right? The coaches do. So why is that so criminal and so underhanded for players to think of themselves? I always get a kick out of that. So it's okay for coaches to do it, and everybody else in society to do it, but college athletes can't do it for some reason. So, yeah, they want to know what's going on. Who's going to be my position coach? Who's going to be my head coach? Am I going to fit in if there's a change? So, yeah, they've got a lot of questions, too. And like I said, they got to make decisions quickly. But the portal opening on December 9th, that's really, speed dating. Those guys hop in, and a lot of times they make a decision in a 3 or 4 day period. So, yeah, again, the players have a lot on their plate, too. But you know what? You always got to, like I said, just try to stay focused on what's right in front of you, Derek. Whatever you're doing in life, you got to focus on what's right in front of you at that point, and not live too far in the future. It's easy to say that because everybody wants to know what's going to happen to them, especially these players and the staffers. But again, they have to just try to take care of a business here against, like I said, a Michigan State team that's at least really has something to play for as far as bowl eligibility goes.
How are they looking health-wise heading into this thing tomorrow night, Tom?
There's some concerns, Derek. Botros Alessandro is dinged up, but he's expected to play. Ryan Walters said that. I think there's not a great possibility. I think C.J. Smith could be out. I get the feeling he could be out. So keep your eye to see if number 9 suited up tomorrow night at all, or tonight, I should say. And the nose tackle spot, Cole Brevard and Mo Amanade. Keep your eye there too. They could be thin there. We'll see if both those guys make it or not. And, Gus Hartwig, keep your eye on Gus. I know Gus got hurt late in that game. Last week got rolled up on, came out. Ethan Trent came in, then Gus went back out there. But, Gus is the kind of guy that I think is probably going to try to gut it out. But again, keep your eye to see if we see old number 53 out there snapping the ball or not.
Last thing here, Tom, now that we've had all 4 of the preseason top 10s and still another top 10 to come with Indiana, who even if they lose to Ohio State, I'm assuming is not going to fall out of the top 10. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I think all 4 games were obviously very lopsided. The closest game was Oregon, and clearly anybody watching that game could see that Oregon just decided to sort of take it easy, right? I mean, they were in cruise control for a good chunk of the second half of that game. How would you rank those 4? Not only against how they played against Purdue, just from seeing them this year. Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is in chronological order of how Purdue played them this season.
How would I rank them as far as how well Purdue played against them?
No, how would you rank them overall? Because obviously all 4 of those teams are playoff and presumably national title contenders.
Well, I think Oregon's well, they are the number 1 team in the country as far as the AP poll goes. They would be my number 1 team too. And then Ohio State, and then I think I probably would lean toward Notre Dame and then Penn State. I know Notre Dame lost the game to Northern Illinois. It seems like years ago, but they won at Texas A&M. They've been pretty impressive. Got a big ball game Saturday night against Army in Yankee Stadium. And Penn State just has no meat on their bone. They're a lot like Indiana. I think we talked last week. Neither of those 2 schools really have any impressive wins on their resumes. They beat Illinois at home, and they won at Wisconsin, and they had a close loss to Ohio State. Nothing really impressive. And Indiana, we've talked about too. We can talk about them a little later in this program tonight. But yeah, I guess that's how I would slot those 4 schools.
Yeah, it is kind of funny how here in this is me editorializing a little bit, but here in Big Ten country, we look at Illinois, who's ranked and 7-3, and we're like, they're not any good. Whereas down south, South Carolina and Vanderbilt and teams like that are just the best competition ever, right? Like those are huge quality wins. It's funny how we treat the teams in this league. When it's Iowa, right, Tom? Whenever Iowa's like 10-2, and we're like, Iowa, like no one thinks that highly of them. It's just kind of funny how the 2 regions of the country sort of absorb their teams. But we'll talk plenty more about the Big Ten slate coming up here, including that big game between Ohio State and IU when we bring you back on at the end of the show. But we got your opponent view coming up, and we appreciate the analysis and observations as always, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Derek.
That's our friend Tom Dienhart, analyst here at GoldandBlack.com. Wanted to thank a couple of more sponsors who make Gold and Black Radio possible every single week, including this Friday edition of the show, like East End Grill and Ripple and Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event, and the Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. As I had mentioned, Tom had the chance to catch up with J.U. Karpick, who formerly played at Michigan State. In fact, this makes me feel a little bit old. He and I are the same age. He would have been there for the very late Joe Tiller years, around the mid-2000s. So we're the same age, but his college eligibility started a little bit later. But he's part of the Michigan State football broadcast team. He joined Tom earlier this week, and here is his opponent view of the Michigan State Spartans as Purdue heads into this night game at Spartan Stadium.
Hey, really pleased to be joined by former Michigan State great J.U. Karpick. Spent some time in the NFL, and he's now working as a Michigan State Spartan football radio analyst. J.U.'s going to drop some Spartan knowledge on us as the Boilermakers get ready to play in East Lansing Friday night, 8 p.m. on Fox. J.U., thank you very much for joining us. Real quick, tell our listeners and viewers what they can expect from the Michigan State offense on Friday night.
Yeah, I think from the offense, you're going to see multiple sets for Michigan State. You try to utilize, the talented quarterback, Aiden Childs. So you're going to see a bunch of, 2 tight end sets, 11 personnel, try to mix things up a little bit. The big thing that they're going to try to do is probably try to establish the ground game and control the possession of the game that way. You're going to, that's what, for the most part, you're going to see from the Spartan offense. It's going to be a lot of, Aiden Childs trying to use his legs. And also, too, you can't forget about the dynamic freshman wide receiver, Nick Marsh, trying to figure out different ways that they can get the football in his hands in space so he can go out and make a play.
And then from the defense, how's that Spartan defense been shaping up? And what can Boilermaker fans look for from that Michigan State defense on Friday night?
Yeah, the defense is, it's study every week. They try to do something different things. Defensive coordinator Joe Rossi, who's, he's used to playing, Big Ten opponents coming from Minnesota. So he's seen Purdue, he's seen other teams in the Big Ten. They try to do a lot of different things with them, disguising coverages, bringing linebackers up to the line of scrimmage, sending some at times, but dropping them into coverage. And one of the biggest keys is going to be that defensive line. They're going to have to get pressure on Purdue's quarterback and get in the backfield and disrupt them a little bit.
Are there any 1, 2, or 3 players on defense fans should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, on defense, keep an eye for, Cal Halliday. He's that Mr. Reliable in the linebacker position there. Another guy that's pretty good and really good at diagnosing plays is another linebacker, Jordan Hall, the second-year guy. And so those are the guys that Spartans fans should, Boilermakers fans should really, keep an eye on, because they're the quarterback of that defense.
And then, J.U., how do you see this game unfolding? 2 teams, haven't had great seasons. Michigan State's still fighting for the bowl life. They need this win, obviously, to try to get towards 6 victories. Purdue, as you know, is just in the midst of an abysmal season. Has lost 9 games in a row, just looking for any type of success. How do you see this game unfolding? Michigan State's, I think, at least about a 13-point favorite, I think.
Yeah, I see it unfolding. Michigan State, they're trying to fight. They're trying to get to a bowl game for the first time since 2021. They haven't been able to do that. So they know there's still a lot that they can play for. There's a lot that's, a lot of opportunity that's ahead of them. It's going to be at home Friday night, big time, college football, Fox. And for Purdue side, they're in there trying to play spoilers. This is a Purdue team that, like you just said, they lost, 9 in a row. They're trying to develop and form an identity. All these guys are trying to put something on tape, be it for if they're at Purdue, next year, or if they're somewhere else. So both teams, have a lot to play for, and I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. So hopefully the Spartans can take it selfishly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a pretty chilly night from what I've seen from early forecast.
Yeah.
And, Jonathan Smith's a good young coach. I think fans there have to be excited about him. And again, JU for Purdue, just all types of speculation swirling around the program. Who's going to be the coach next year? Will Ryan Walters be back for a third year? So again, just a lot of unknowns for the Boilermakers as they make that trek north for, like I said, it should be a cold night. And, Purdue won the last meeting way back in 2021, a huge upset, 40-20.
Yeah.
MSU was number 3 in the country. Before that, JU, I think the Spartans won 8 in a row against the Boilermakers. So, again, ought to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. Hopefully I'll get a chance to see you. In the interim, I appreciate you stopping by, sir.
All right, sounds good. Let me know, and we'll definitely catch up. I'll take you out for a good burger.
Thank you, JU.
All right.
That's J.U. Karpick. Thanks to him for filling in for our opponent view this week as Purdue takes on Michigan State. I keep saying tomorrow night. We're taping this on Thursday. So one of those Friday night Big Ten games, which I'm not a huge fan of. But, hey, they want the money, so they're going to get the money however they can get it. And it's semi-state in Indiana, so I guess it's not like there's a whole load of Indiana high school football games coming up here on Friday night. But Tom had alluded to the weather, going to be a chilly night in East Lansing. And here's our friend Chad Evans at WLFI for the game day forecast for the Boilermakers and the Spartans.
Hello, everyone. I'm Storm Team 18 Chief Meteorologist Chad Evans with your forecast for the Purdue-Michigan State matchup on Friday evening. The weather doesn't look good there in East Lansing. Gray, overcast, windy, some cold rain showers and drizzle around. And it'll be wind-driven at that. Temperatures kind of hovering around 35 to about 37 degrees. Pretty raw with wind chills running in the 20s to right around 30. So bundle up and have the raincoat. That's a look at your forecast. Boiler up.
Thanks to Chad Evans, WLFI meteorologist, for that great weather report. And now we transition over to basketball. Let's welcome on our friend Brian Neubert to do that, GoldandBlack.com columnist and basketball guru who joins us from the car. Brian, look, we knew, and we kept saying it, right? The non-conference streak it's going to end. And I thought it was pretty apparent early on that it was going to be a long night in Milwaukee, just the way that first half went. Purdue very fortunate to be down just 7. They end up losing by 18. I got to give credit to Marquette. I hadn't seen Purdue that discombobulated in a minute. I mean, they really looked out of sorts for a good chunk of that game.
Yeah, first off, let me apologize for the setting here. I know I look like the Emperor from Star Wars, but I'm a complete spaz, and I'm as unreliable an individual as imaginable. Yeah, Purdue hasn't been gummed up offensively that way very often the last few years. The only other game that really comes to mind is UConn. And UConn was obviously a great team. And I think you got to give Marquette a lot of credit for, doing what Marquette does at a very high level. They are built to be really active, really energetic, really, really disruptive, really interchangeable from a defensive perspective. And they really gave Purdue a lot of problems. They were very active. They got their hands on a lot of passes. They didn't give up on any plays. They blocked a lot of shots. They generated a lot of turnovers. I think, Purdue has a turnover issue. That has been their soft underbelly for a few years now, in part because they're so good offensively and just kind of have to survive on defense. So every turnover is maybe a little bit more damaging than it would be to most teams. But I think that they just got kind of knocked out of what they wanted to do. They didn't play with the same poise, the same savvy I think they normally do. I think this is what's normal, though. I think you go on the road in November to play a great team in your 5th game of the year. You're playing freshmen. And this is kind of what's supposed to happen. The warped reality of the 39-game non-conference winning streak, doesn't change the realities of college basketball that Purdue was finally subject to at Marquette.
Did you think it was almost maybe not an opposite ends of the spectrum game, but I think we saw the potential of this offense against Alabama when things are clicking, and then you kind of saw the other side of it where I think Marquette was a reminder that this team still has a long way to go to get everybody on the same page offensively, right? Even though you're returning players, it's a lot of guys that haven't necessarily had a lot of game experience together when you talk about, throwing in CJ Cox and some new faces as well.
Yeah, but I think Purdue did the right things to start the game against Marquette. I think they got a lot of pretty good looks from three-point range that just they didn't make. And it's not like Marquette just knocked them out of everything they wanted to do from the get-go. Purdue had an opportunity to, completely change the way this game unfolded if they made a couple more threes. Jakari Harris had a couple good looks. Fletcher Lawyer had one wide open look that is a practice shot for him that didn't go. Braden Smith had a couple opportunities to come off a ball screen and shoot that moving three that he makes so well. That's so uncommon among point guards. They just didn't go. Had Purdue got off to a better shooting start, they might have this game might have unfolded a little bit differently. But it's kind of the nature too of playing away from your home arena. You're less likely to go on those shooting runs, and Purdue just kind of had to play through it and just couldn't take care of the basketball well enough, or execute or maximize its opportunities at the rim well enough to overcome that inability to make those shots early.
Besides the glass half full on the shooting early in that game, any other positives that jump out to you from that loss, from that performance?
I think Camden Heidi's found his place. To see him, making threes and whatnot, on top of the, in addition to the rebounding he showed against Alabama, I think there's a real place for him at that 4 spot when Purdue plays those lineups. I think Miles Colvin, didn't make any shots, obviously was part of a defense that gave up a triple-double to Cam Jones, but 8 rebounds for him that might be a career high. And I'm not just talking about Purdue, I'm talking about his life. To see what those two guys have done the last couple of games in terms of their all-around games and things like that has been a really positive development for Purdue. I think Caleb Furst has done some really positive things, to the point where I'd be surprised if Purdue either didn't start him against Marshall on Saturday or just jump right ahead to Trey Coppen-Wren playing as your primary 5. So Caleb Furst's contributions lately have been pretty positive, even though he didn't cash in a lot of opportunities at the rim that could have made this a really big game for him and could have really maybe changed things a little bit for Purdue too in terms of the way this game unfolded.
We're talking with Brian Neubert, talking Purdue hoops here on Gold and Black Radio. It's brought to you by our friends at Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler up. I thought Matt Painter was really effusive in his praise of Marquette in the postgame presser, and it's a program that's similar to Purdue. I mean, we talked about this last week where they get guys and then those guys stay and then pretty much all those guys get better. And I guess, Brian, you got to speak glowingly about anybody that beat you by 18, 20 points like Marquette was able to do. But did you get the sense that Painter appreciates Shaka Smart and programs like Marquette a little bit more because they're very similar to what he does with his program?
Yeah. And I think that, Painter probably appreciates the fact too that they have a system. They stick to it. They teach it really well. They recruit to it really well. They develop players really well. Cam Jones was in that game in Mackey Arena a couple of years ago, and he was just a freshman, and obviously wasn't the player he is now. Then, kind of the same way Trey Coppen-Wren's in the same boat. He was a redshirt freshman when those two teams first played. Now he's a really good college player who's going to be, an all-conference level guy. But I just think Painter also respects coaches who do things like what Shaka did in terms of scheduling this game. A lot of people, Painter, Nato, Shaka Smart wouldn't play these games, wouldn't sign up for these series because they would just rather pick up water weight wins, before conference play, and then kind of deal with reality when they have to. Whereas, Shaka Smart, Painter, they're willing to go on the road, and Marquette will do that next year when they come to Purdue. They're willing to go on the road, play great teams, and lose. They're willing to sign up for the Maui Invitational. Not that a lot of teams would pass on the Maui Invitational, but they were both in that field last year. That was essentially a Final Four in November. And both programs just really challenge themselves and really look at the big picture, as opposed to the granular stuff of November and December. And I think Painter probably has a certain level of respect for coaches who view things the same way as he does.
Marshall is the last, I guess, what you would put in the category of water weight wins, even though they're like a fringe top 150 team. So it's not like, they're way, way back as far as Division I is concerned. But then it's all Power Fives from here through Christmas. When you talk about, what Purdue's going to play in the non-league, what are you hoping to see in this response against Marshall and showing that maybe some of the bad habits from the Marquette game won't linger? Is it still about the turnovers and rebounding for you, Brian?
Well, I think the turnovers were more a product of Marquette than anything else. So I don't think anything that happens against Marshall is going to be real reflective of whether that's an enduring problem or not. I think Purdue, is much closer to their form against Alabama when they committed only 3 turnovers against an offensive-minded program, as opposed to the Marquette game when they committed, double-digit, nearly 20 turnovers against a defensive-minded program. But that's going to be an emphasis every single game. I think what you want to see against Marshall, not that anyone should beat their chest over beating Marshall, but anger. I think what made Purdue great last season, on top of having great players, having a ton of experience, was just that Kaiser Sose approach they took to that season, where they just wanted to get rid of everything in their path because they were so pissed off about the NCAA tournament that happened before. Purdue historically here has responded pretty well to losses. And, obviously this was a rare November loss, and you just kind of want to see a business-like sort of approach to this game, and Purdue's been pretty good about that. There was a reason Purdue won 39 non-conference games in a row, and that streak is impressive because of who you beat during that streak: the Dukes, the Gonzagas, the Tennessees, the Arizonas, but also because you just never stepped on a landmine. You just never phoned one in and effed around and found out. And that's kind of the professionalism and the consistency that has really defined Purdue here these last couple of years. And you just want to kind of see that now. And I wouldn't anticipate you seeing anything other than that.
So you said you want to see anger against Marshall. Should Purdue let the hate flow through them against Marshall? Is that what you're saying from your darkened car there, Emperor?
I see what you did there. I thought you were going to play off the Kaiser Sose thing.
Yeah.
These men of
what
will.
was it, Wayne's World, Usual Suspects? I mean, we're doing everything on this show lately.
He showed these men of will what it really meant to be, to have will, or what will really means, or something like that. Whatever the line was from Verbal.
Yeah, we're doing well with the movie references here. Appreciate you joining us from your car, and we will bring you back on to talk a little football coming up later on in the show, Brian. Thanks so much, pal.
All right.
That's our friend Brian Neubert, who did kind of look like the Emperor there, which, but hey, it works. And this is Brian's life. November, December, January, February, March with Purdue basketball in the car a lot. He's going to Milwaukee. He's going all types of places, bringing you the best Purdue hoops coverage around here at GoldandBlack.com. Now for the grand poobah of GoldandBlack.com, the publisher, our friend Alan Karpick, as we get back into football. Purdue taking on Michigan State, and obviously with the whole East-West divisions of the last however many years it was, 12 years, they've only really played sparingly, but some memorable ones mixed in there, including the last meeting, right? They hung 40 on the number 3 Spartans and won that game with Jeff Brom in the 2021 season.
Right, and I'm just glad I don't have to deal with I do know the Kaiser Sose reference, but you guys are going deeper than I can go, so just spare me that if you can. I can do Caddyshack, I can do Shawshank Redemption, I can do the Usual Suspects, but that was some good stuff. No, I think that that game, a very memorable one for Aiden O'Connell and Purdue. You got to think about that team under Jeff Brom. The only team, I think, in Purdue history, I think it was over a 50-year period, to beat 2 top 5 teams in the same season. Yeah. They beat Iowa. Number 2 Iowa came back and beat, and really boat raced to some extent, Michigan State in that 40-29 win. That was in Ross-Ade Stadium, and it seems like that was years ago, considering where Purdue football is right now.
Yeah, and then capping it with the Music City Bowl, that thriller against Tennessee. That really was a very fun season, and you thought that you were on the cusp, like everything was the upward trajectory, right? I mean, it's college sports, right, Alan? I mean, things can change quickly, and obviously they've changed for this Purdue program. But looking back even deeper into the history of Michigan State, we had talked about this off air. I knew Joe Tiller had success against Nick Saban, but I didn't really remember the 99 game, which is now a quarter century ago. And you also mentioned the Orton-Standiford late game heroics in the 2002 game, which I had completely forgotten about too, which also came, obviously, in a matchup against Michigan State.
Well, the 99 game was also in Ross-Ade Stadium. Michigan State ranked number 5, and Drew Brees threw, I think, 3 or 4 picks in that game, but still came up with a bunch of yards. Chris Daniels, 21 catches. I think a Big Ten record, 301 yards as well on his way to an all Big Ten season. A game that I always think about weather. Weather's going to be cold and nasty up in East Lansing. In West Lafayette that day was about 75 degrees. You had a huge thunderstorm during part of it, or at least a rain shower, I should say. Didn't slow the game down. But Purdue had a pretty convincing 52-28 win for Drew Brees and company in a 99 season that was packed with a lot of really good Big Ten opponents.
And this has actually been
2002 in the cold. That weather that day was very similar to what we're going to see tonight, and that is that Kyle Orton to John Staniford comes right off the bench. Brandon Kearse is hurt. Orton did not play that game until the very end. Threw a couple warm-up passes, came up and wings one down the sideline. This was not a very good Michigan State team, but they had to make that play late in the game to get that 45-42 win. Really one of the more memorable plays if you think about a guy coming cold off the bench, Kyle Orton to John Staniford, and kind of looking off the play and going deep. And Purdue got out of the East Lansing with a win. That and that 2006 Casey Welch field goal, only kick he ever had for Purdue. That's the last time Purdue's won in Spartan Stadium.
Yeah, and an interesting series because 36-29-3. I mean, it's been fairly even, but it's been one-sided stretches in there. Like, yeah. I think before the 21 game, Michigan State had won something like 7 or 8 in a row. Tiller's teams really dominated this series. The Breeze years through the early 2000s, and then if you go back to like the Fred Akers, Jim Coletto years where, unfortunately a lot of Big Ten teams dominated the series against Purdue, right? But, 84-94, I think Michigan State had won 9 of 10. So it's been kind of this seesaw a little bit, but overall, the series is about as even as it's been with any Big Ten team.
Well, you think about the irony. Purdue couldn't beat George Perlis very often, but they could beat Nick Saban at Michigan State 3 straight times. The great trivia question that I screwed up a couple of episodes ago, but Joe Teller beat him in 97, 98. Amazing comebacks in both those games, and then the 99 win in Ross-Ade Stadium.
One basketball question I wanted to get to, Alan, now that the season's underway and we have a little bit of a sample size to go on, including 2 prominent games, the win over Alabama, the loss to Marquette. What are your early impressions of the Boilers here through the first 3 weeks?
Well, nobody knows it better than Brian, but I think this is a team that's going to be fun to watch if you can just relax if you're Purdue fans. And that's hard for Purdue fans, any fans to do. Matt Painter's really good at putting teams together. There are some missing pieces to this puzzle. There are a lot of questions whether Will Berg's going to do the job. What are they going to do inside? What roles Caleb First is going to have? We know that the big 3 are going to be really good, but are they going to be good enough to carry Purdue into the second week of the NCAA tournament and maybe make a run at the Big Ten championship? You get scared a little bit when you finally lose and you see a team that really was better athletically than you were, Marquette, but they're going to be better than a lot of teams. Purdue still has got some horses in there. It'll be fun to also watch, obviously, what we saw from C.J. Cox against Alabama, but Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox, watch those guys evolve. Will be a fun storyline. It's going to be a really interesting season if you don't stress on the fact that Purdue is not going to go 27-4 in the regular season. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah, and I do think what you can look forward to is they're going to be a lot better on March 1st than they are on December 1st. And that's always – yeah, that's always something to look forward to with a team like this. It's
no doubt
growing into itself. Alan, we're going to bring back the whole crew, and let's talk about the Big Ten weekend slate that we have coming up here. Obviously, guys, the highlight game is the highlight game in the country with who would have thought, right? Ohio State hosting Indiana at the Horseshoe. Tom, you seem to be a little bit more of, I don't want to say detractor, but a little bit more skeptical about Indiana. Is this one of those games that in your eyes they need to They need to keep close in order for them to earn a playoff berth in your eyes.
I think they got to win. What good's a close loss? I mean, think about this. It's so absurd. I mean, is this about being unbeaten or about beating teams? About who you lost to, who you beat? Who have you beat? Who have you beat, Derek Schultz? They beat nobody. 6-5 Washington. I don't care if they lose by 1 point in Columbus. You got to win or forget it. I think they're out. There's no way an 11-1 IU team is as good as a 2-loss SEC team. Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, or Alabama. You're out of your mind. You think 11-1 IU is better than any of those 2-loss SEC teams?
Derek, you have 40 minutes to rebut that. Go ahead, man. Or Brian, go ahead.
Empty calories. There's nothing there, man.
Do I need to come in as hot as Tom just did?
Yeah.
Defend IU. How about that does the Western Illinois game or the Old Dominion game? Or who?
Charlotte. Yeah, they had some. Yeah.
I know.
How do you avoid playing kind of Penn?
But State, devil's advocate, Tom. You can't put Penn State in.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Well,
Brian, go ahead. You can rebut. You got to we got to get you in here. Go ahead.
I have to make it worth all the time you've spent looking up my nostrils into my skull.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, I think we can all agree that if Indiana played Georgia tomorrow, Indiana's not winning that game. But the resume does have to matter. I know Indiana hasn't played anybody unless they beat Ohio State, unless they win some of these games down the stretch. But you have to reward winning. And it's not a hypothetical exercise over who would beat who. It's who belongs, who did everything they could do to get in this field. And I just think it would be really hard to turn Indiana away if they're unbeaten, other than losing to Ohio State, who's obviously in the field. If you play Ohio State competitively, then you sit here and say, see, we belong with these national title caliber teams. If you don't, then, you really have to kind of explain yourself.
Yeah, one game go ahead, Ryan.
No, but if it comes down to Indiana and Penn State, the human element's getting Penn State in that playoff every single time. So I think that, and with the SEC's power, getting a fifth SEC team in over Indiana, that's a very real possibility. So Indiana's got to play well against Ohio State. I'm not going to say they have to win, because I don't think that's necessarily true, but they can't go out there and get splattered.
And I'm going to throw another one in there. Minnesota and the Fighting PJ Flex beat Penn State. That will help Indiana's chances. Don't you? I mean, Big Ten's got to have 3 teams in this, don't you?
Yeah,
think?
and again, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, and I agree with Tom. Who you beat matters, but who you lost to should matter too. You mentioned Washington and Michigan; those teams are better than Kentucky. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, who's the 17th team in the SEC right now. Georgia gave up 31 to Miss State, who's terrible. Carson Beck's out there throwing like 2 picks a week. I mean, look, I get that they're Georgia, but like you watch them this year and you're like, this is it. They would be favored by Vegas, right? But again, like we're talking hypotheticals. I just think that, to Brian's point, you have to earn your way in, or else let's just write up the bracket on August 31st. Then if we're just going to throw Georgia and all these teams in, 3-loss Georgia is going to get in, then why even play?
Yeah. What about look at every strength of schedule metric out there, and look where Indiana's at on that strength of schedule metric.
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah,
103rd. 103rd, I think they are, right?
I'm thinking Minnesota's going to beat Penn State. We didn't have that in Media Mania this week, and they probably won't. But Penn State, though Penn State was impressive enough, but how can you be impressive right now against Purdue? Based on where Purdue is right now, it's pretty good.
Real quick, guys. Another game: Wisconsin at Nebraska. Nebraska's white knuckling it once again to get to bowl eligibility. Their backs against the wall. They've got to win out. Of course, that means beating the Badgers at home this week. Then they got to go to Iowa on Black Friday. It's incredible for me to think that Nebraska is still in this peril. Have not been to a bowl since 2016. It's just unbelievable. Here's Nebraska once again, just trying to get to some who gives a crap bowl. And this is Nebraska.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. USC at UCLA.
Yeah.
You all know the struggles the Bruins, I should say the Trojans have had this year. That's a big one for Lincoln Riley too. And Alan talked about that Penn State at Minnesota game. That could be, like you said, a real trap door for the Nittany Lions up there. That's a pretty good. I'll call it a plucky Minnesota team.
Nebraska has to win them both. They only have 4 wins.
Both.
Yeah, they got to get to 6. Okay, I thought they were at 5, but yeah, that's dicey.
Yeah, wait, I think
Alan, you're right. Yeah.
They're 5 and 5, right?
So they've got to win one out of the last
they got
2.
to split.
Yeah.
They got to meet the Badgers, or they go on the road and beat Iowa.
Yeah.
As Tom mentioned, though, they're the only Power 4 team that hasn't been. That's the longest bowl. Not making a bowl streak, which is just incredible because it's Nebraska, right? I mean, like, how is that even?
Well, and we all talked earlier in the year how we and obviously they played well, and we were impressed by how they took care of Colorado and they were passing the eye test with Matt Rule and company and Dylan Raiola and all that, but. Boy, it is amazing how they've not been able.
Think about what's happened to Colorado and Nebraska since then.
Oh, I know, it's crazy.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah,
to see both of those teams kind of go in opposite directions. But we'll have all of it for you
about college football. That how much do we care about bowl games anymore if they're not playoff games?
We don't. I agree.
Like half the players aren't going to play.
That's a good point.
Right. The game doesn't matter for the most part. The coaches would probably rather be recruiting transfers in December than coaching to play a game that, is or isn't going to really change their standing at their school. Is it just a lowest standard possible to meet for success now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the one carrot you got left, I guess. But yeah, Brian, your point's not lost. And
I think Brian's setting right now in that statement fit so perfectly. That's a great way to wrap the show. It's very dark. It's true, but it's dark.
Well, they're sitting here thinking, like, if you're an athletic director and you have to decide whether or not your coach is working out, and they're at a place like Nebraska and they won 6 games to go play New Mexico State in the whatever the hell bowl, the Usual Suspects Bowl. Like, what difference does it make? That's not Nebraska's standard, and that's not a lot of people's standard. It's just another game.
Yeah, another game.
But Nebraska's got to walk before they can crawl, before they can run again, right? With where that program's been. So I don't know. Maybe it's at least something they could point to and say, see, we're making progress, even if it's, the ritual sacrifice of the Pop-Tarts mascot in the Pop-Tarts Bowl or something, something ridiculous like we've been able to see in the bowl season. Appreciate you guys.
All right.
Thanks so much for joining me. And we'll have plenty to talk about next week on the show. And of course, Tom and Alan and Brian, everybody else, Carm as well, will have the simulcast following the game against Michigan State, the penultimate game of the 2024 football season for Purdue football. And Brian will have his coverage of Purdue and Marshall men's hoops coming up this weekend at Mackey Arena. Thanks so much for joining us here on Gold and Black Radio. A final shout out to our sponsors for making this Friday show possible, including Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans, East End Grill and Ripple and Company, 2 distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. The Sand Valley Resort, celebrate all that the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And of course, don't forget to become a subscriber if you're not already here at GoldandBlack.com. Knucklehead Central, Brian, Tom, Carm, Alan, these shows, everything at GoldandBlack.com is just a click away if you're a subscriber at GoldandBlack.com. We would love to have you join our community there of Boilermaker basketball and football fans. But until the simulcast and Gold and Black Radio on Tuesday, we will see you next time. Hope you enjoyed it. This has been Gold and Black Radio here at GoldandBlack.com.